G'day guys, it's Benjamin Morgan from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and today here for a special broadcast with none other than legendary South Australian Senator Rex Patrick. Now, Rex is a great friend to general aviation right across Australia, and during his time in the Australian Parliament has done some amazing work, not only for the aviation industry, but the broader Australian community as well. And today we are joined by Rex. So welcome, Senator.
G'day, Ben. How are you? I'm not sure the word legendary belonged in the intro. I'd like a bit more humble than that. I like to think I work hard and I press issues, and aviation has been one of those issues, and it's a really important one.
Well, Rex, you're certainly no stranger to aviation issues, and you've had an incredible journey inside of the Australian Parliament. Maybe the best place to start for today's discussion is gain a little bit of background of who you are, the time that you've spent on the RRAT. We might even touch on a few of the subjects that you're involved in there, and then we might jump straight into the substance of the GA inquiry, its outcome and recommendations, and also we'll touch lightly on some issues around some airports. So I guess I'll hand it straight over to you.
Yeah, look, I'll have to say up front, I'm an accidental senator. I am not a career politician, and maybe that's a good thing. I was a submariner in the Royal Australian Navy. Worked in the Navy for about 11 years. Actually, during that time, for some strange reason, I wasn't satisfied by flying around underwater, and I went off and got myself a PPL whilst I was in the Navy as well. So a little bit dangerous. I don't have a lot of hours up. I do have a retractable undercarriage endorsement and variable pitch, but I wouldn't fly with me at the moment. Haven't done my 3 touch and goes for many years, but you know, I got an understanding there. I then left the Navy, worked in the defence industry, and actually it was during that time I could see a pending disaster with our future submarine program, and so I somehow got involved in advocating to a Liberal senator, helping a Liberal senator out as the opposition defence minister, and trying to get a reasonable outcome that wasn't going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money. I've clearly failed in that, noting that the government has managed to just exit a $5.5 billion attack class submarine program that resulted in 0 deliverables. Anyway, I then somehow got connected up through Nick Xenophon. I kind of liked the cut of his jib. He was an independent. He didn't have to follow party lines. If an issue came up that he was interested in, he would pursue it. And I was used to sort of put some engineering discipline around some of the work that he did. When he departed the Senate, he invited me to take his seat, and that's where I've been since 2017. I have been involved in the RRAT committee. In actual fact, just so people understand, all senators can be at least participating members of all committees, and they can also be a full member. I'm actually not a full member of the RRAT committee. Just means I can't vote as a committee member on certain procedural things that they do along the way in terms of having an inquiry. But because of a strong interest in aviation, I have been quite involved in the RRAT committee right from the get-go.
Okay, well, you know, certainly you have been involved in that committee, and maybe you should be a full voting member of it, because the body of work, Senator, that you have amassed around the issues on aviation is impressive, to say the least. And so I stand by my original comment that you've earned a legendary status. These are not easy issues to understand, and they're very complex, not only in terms of the regulatory nature, but in many cases, the relationships between industry and regulator as well. And so maybe could you touch on a little bit of your experience in dealing with some of those headline issues? You were very intimately involved in the Pell Air issue, which resulted, well, first of all, before it resulted in some successes, it took a huge body of work around Nick Xenophon and his efforts. So maybe share with us some of those thoughts.
Yeah, look, one of the things that the Senator ultimately found in relation to that was Don James, who was the pilot in that particular accident, was unfairly treated by the ATSB, who sought to blame him and try and basically cast blame away from elements of the aviation system that all of your members understand far better than what I do, that something had to be done. And that was a sort of an interesting outcome because, and I say interesting because of where I think we might need to go in the future when we're dealing with CASA. As a result of that inquiry, we ended up getting the Canadians to come and have a look at our ATSB and doing an independent study to look at what needed to change. So, that was one incident or one inquiry that I was heavily involved in. Dom has become a good friend of mine, and we talk from time to time. I've also been involved in pressing the rights of the important rights of Angel Flight, making sure that they were not unduly treated by CASA. And look, just in general, I have watched the aviation industry decline, the general aviation industry decline over the years. From when I did my license, there was a flying school at Whyalla Airport. It's gone. It just seems to get harder and harder. It's almost as though CASA's view on the world is that in order to be safe, or the best way for people to be safe in general aviation is not to actually leave the tarmac. That seems to be their objective, and it's such an important area. General aviation is like a cog in our normal society, particularly around the regions, being able to get people moving from non-RPT hubs, getting medical services, a whole range of work, crop dusting, surveying work, all manner of activity that is essential for particularly regional activities and economic ventures to be able to be successful. And sadly, it just seems as though at every turn, people who have not got experience out in what I call the real world, they're trapped in the Canberra bubble, are making decisions that on paper seem kind of nice, but in practice just erode a really important industry.
Well, a great example of that, Senator, is an issue which has been quite recent through Senate estimates, and that's been the pressing of CASA in relation to the approval of the former Australian Army Black Hawks for use for emergency service here in Australia. Those Black Hawks have been grounded, and we as an industry have watched on as CASA has taken many years to debate the practical use of these helicopters in an emergency sense. We just had a huge flood that took place in Lismore, and that flood required an enormous response. And in many cases, members of AOPA with private helicopters and commercial helicopters were in there doing the heavy lifting because we had Black Hawks sitting on the ground. And I watched on, as many of my industry colleagues watched on, as CASA were grilled on this issue prior to the floods. And we watched on as Chris Monahan gave his I would argue, misguided response to the issues preventing the helicopters' use. And so it was just a really sad outcome that we've got these great assets sitting around for years on the ground. CASA can't make a decision. No one in CASA seems to be able to just cut through the red tape and get on with making practical, safe, pragmatic and sensible decisions that would have enabled those Black Hawks to be up there serving the community. Keeping in perspective, Senator, those helicopters during their time in service with the Australian Army even carried the Prime Minister. They carried Press Media Corps. They carried no end of civilians in emergency relief situations. But because the Army's donated them, CASA seems to sit there saying, we don't know what to do.
Yeah, look, and it's a really clear illustration that AOPA and others can use to support their own cause, because no one in Australia can understand how you can take a Black Hawk helicopter that used to fly around in probably the most dangerous conditions, flying SAS, flying commandos around, doing stuff that, would otherwise be unlawful for a pilot to do, pushing the envelope, and for that aircraft to then not be permitted to fly in support of, firefighting or rescue-related work. The same thing with the 737s not being able to carry passengers. You just look at people and say, look, CASA has prohibited, the New South Wales fire service from flying its people around in its converted 737, and people just look like you're from another planet if you suggest that it's unsafe for people to go in to fly in a 737, and rightly so. It's just crazy, and maybe it's a case of just the bureaucrats not really being confident to stand up and make a sensible decision. And I note that in the inquiry that the committee has just completed, there was a call for a review of the culture that exists inside CASA. So, it's consistent with what the committee found, that there's something going on wrong inside CASA.
Well, Senator, I get telephone calls, as I imagine you get inundated with correspondence from the aviation industry, but probably equally so. I get contacted by aircraft owners, pilots, aviation businesses, and it probably wouldn't come as a shock to you that I get a call from a significant number of CASA employees who reach out to me to say, Ben, the situation inside of CASA has become dire, and I'm quite concerned with much of the correspondence that I'm receiving from those people that are saying that the organisation internally has been gutted of technical capability, and that key decision makers that now hold extremely key roles, significant key roles inside of the organisation, are either career bureaucrats or persons who lack a genuine operational understanding of aircraft and of the aviation ecosystem itself, and that they are now the ones making decisions, which probably starts to explain why over the last 10 years we've started to see a huge expansion in the timeframes it takes for CASA in order to take decisions. I don't think anybody in the aviation industry would criticise CASA for wanting to assess a situation or to look at anything in detail, but when it takes 3 years of debate and we still haven't got an answer as to whether a Black Hawk helicopter that served for 20 years in a high-stress combat environment could have been airlifting supplies into and out of Lismore, could have been airlifting personnel into and out of Lismore. I mean, it kind of goes beyond all terms of reasonableness, and I think many of us in the aviation industry would be very much supporting the calls you're making, and we understand the frustration you demonstrate from your side of the desk at the inquiries when questioning CASA. Now, you've brought us to a segue there, which is very important to get back on track, which is the Senate inquiry into the general aviation industry and obviously the culture of CASA. There was a fairly significant and broad submission of material, a body of work that was submitted to this inquiry from everyday Australians throughout the aviation industry, mum and dad businesses, including industry associations, some of the larger orgs. Could you maybe give us a little bit of reflection on what you thought of that material and the general themes in that material?
Well, look, just in general, with any Senate inquiry, the Senate inquiries are fantastic for a number of reasons. One of them is that they do get to hear from all stakeholders, and we try to make sure that every stakeholder at least knows that the inquiry is going on, and we invite them to submit. The other interesting thing we have about the inquiry process, of course, we can bring in the officials as well. So we can bring in officials from CASA, officials from the department. If necessary, we can bring in statisticians from government to get access to numbers. So really, I have a general rule: if you want to be able to understand a particular topic well, if the Senate's done an inquiry into it, it's a great place to go and to start your research. And in this instance, we did get a wide variety of inputs. And again, another great thing about parliamentary inquiries is that you can make submissions under parliamentary privilege. Once they've been accepted by the committee, it doesn't matter what you say. It's not adducible in a court. No one can sue you for it. And in fact, the Senate will protect anyone who does make a submission from any adverse outcomes. And that's really important to be able to get to the truth of matters. And, so we saw a whole range of information being provided, and the Senate committee has really pulled it all together quite nicely and making, more than a dozen recommendations, and all of them are pretty solid recommendations.
So Rex, Senator, I did this with Senator Susan McDonald the other day, and I have to apologise, Senator. These are recommendations, and I agree with you. I think that the committee did do a good job in bringing forward some really sensible recommendations that, if they were brought forward as requirements with some express deadlines to get them implemented, I feel that it would make a significant difference in starting to improve the cultural aspects of CASA that are of sincere concern. How do we move these from a recommendation to a requirement?
Okay, so firstly, I think we should give acknowledgement to Senator McDonald. She's done a fantastic job on this. She's really passionate about it. She's not in the same party as me. If you ask me whether you should take her advice on, for example, the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, I would say definitely not. But she's been really, really good on this issue, and I take my hat off to her. She does care about this. Look, politics is about positioning. It's about putting pressure on government to change course, and that's the fundamentals of what we do. If I'll just break this down into simple language. When someone comes to me with a problem, I look at the problem. I then, if I agree that there's an issue, I then use all the tools available to me to move the dial a little bit, and that might be to use media, to use a letter to a minister, a speech in the Senate, calling for an inquiry, ordering the production of documents. There's a whole suite of things that I can do, and all of that is about pressing to do something. A good example of that is just recently I called for a fuel excise cut after Ukraine was invaded by Russia. I was the first senator to call on that to happen, and as a senator, the media picked up on that, questioned the Prime Minister. He was adamant there wasn't going to be one. Angus Taylor was adamant there wasn't going to be one. Josh maybe thought about it a little bit, but ruled it out at the start. And over time, working with media, working with other politicians, the pressure was put on, and we saw in the budget that the government did in fact halve the fuel excise for 6 months. That's an exercise or a demonstration of how you have to approach these recommendations. You can either sit there and treat that inquiry as a good reference to turn back to, or you can move forward and use political pressure to enforce changes. Now, what that means is that we need to have, as part of a sustained campaign, people like myself, people like Susan McDonald and others. You identify some of us senators who can use the Senate tools to be able to push things forward. But you also need to be perhaps working up a strategy amongst AOPA. Your body is a fantastic body, and you've done a really good job since you've taken over, Ben, if I must say so. You've been fearless in your advocacy, and it seems anytime someone wants to put up a roadblock, you're there with graders and all the necessary machinery work to remove the roadblock. And so hats off to you as well. But you might have to pick out a number of those recommendations which you think are key, and then run a campaign where pilots in every single electorate are talking to their members and insisting that something be done. Now, you'll find that Labor members or Liberal members, depending on whether they're in government, will have to do that a little bit behind the scenes because they're not allowed to criticise the current government. Oppositions can be a little bit more vocal, and of course independents such as myself can also weigh in on these things. But you cannot let this document sit and hope that things will change. You have to continue to put pressure on. I remember when I moved a bill to stop the import of goods made from slave labour from Xinjiang in China, because I was concerned about repression of the Uyghurs there. Every week I'd have a conversation with the Uyghurs and we'd work out what I was going to do in the Senate, and I'd say, look, I need a protest out the front of the Parliament on this day, and they would organise it. I need you to go and talk to every single member of Parliament about the issue, and we'd do so in a coordinated way. So they were all getting the same messaging. Obviously, slightly different messages are required as you move up into ministerial levels, and that might be a job for AOPA to do. But there needs to be a campaign put in place to make sure that this does not get put on a shelf and dust gathers, because it's actually an essential body of work, and it's going to be crucial for change moving forward. That document.
Absolutely agree with you.
Can I just say that document?
Sure.
That document is the start of your campaign. So you've done very well to push for the inquiry, get the inquiry up. We've got a good reference point to work from now. Now your work starts.
Absolutely, and I think we'll discuss a little bit later in this interview how some of that will tie in with yourself as well. Look, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that if I could just touch on a couple of points there. Number one, we are largely a very conservative industry, and I think for the aviation industry to speak up publicly and to fiercely advocate on issues goes against the nature of a conservative industry somewhat. And I know I've had a lot of that feedback over the 6 years that I've been involved with AOPA. But I've always held the view, Senator, and I'm sure you would agree, that you should never be ashamed of standing up for the things that are most important to you as an industry. And as Senator McDonald eloquently put in my interview with her, that the senators and our elected officials are faced with thousands of issues, and these issues go well beyond aviation. Aviation is a very important part, but it's a small part as well. And so if these issues are going to be heard, you need to sometimes be extremely loud and extremely noisy to get that onto the agenda. And we do thank you. And I know I speak on behalf of our board, our members, and all of our supporters around the industry. We thank you for continuing to take the interest that you do in the aviation matters, because you could easily just move on to other subjects, but we are very appreciative that aviation is something that you hold dear and you're willing to put your time and your effort into. And so that brings me to my next discussion point for the interview, and I also appreciate the amount of time you've given me today. Privatised airports in Australia are having a massive negative impact on the aviation industry, and it's not just general aviation that have grave concerns for the way in which these airports are being managed. In fact, over the last 3 years, the airlines have all gotten together, and just prior to COVID, the airlines were actually really starting to ramp up their advocacy through the AANZ and other organisations, because they're being exposed now to never-ending increases in terminal charges, gate charges, handling charges. The charges that these privatised airports are raking from our industry are just so excessive, and it's not only causing the airlines to have to pass on these costs to consumers, which costs everyday Australians who want to have access to air travel. But for the general aviation industry, where cost pressures are so enormous, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 150% increases in leasehold every 2 to 3 years, the increasing in landing charges and access and movement fees. I mean, at Bankstown Airport, where AOPA is based, if you roll your aircraft out of a hangar onto the apron just to clean it, you'll get charged. That's a movement charge, and they're going to hammer you for those fees and charges. And if you don't pay the fees and charges, they'll get a debt collector involved. And so this never-ending ratchet of expenses, to quote Dick Smith, has over the last 20 years resulted in the destruction of many general aviation businesses. It's forced them out, and now with the general aviation business community in contraction at these airport sites, we're now seeing the airports converting our valuable aviation land space into non-aviation real estate hubs, and that is accelerating nationwide. And if it's left to continue on that trajectory, we're going to have a major problem with access to aviation infrastructure. Maybe some of your thoughts, Senator, on this issue, and whether you would be supportive of the RRAT and the broader government stepping in at this point to get some sensibility.
Yeah, look, you raise an important issue, and it's not an issue that's necessarily foreign to other sectors as well. This is what happens in terms of privatisation. We take what should be a public utility and we privatise it, and so it loses its focus on utility, on the word utility, that it's there as a piece of infrastructure that assists the operation of the economy, assists the operation of public society, and the focus then shifts to making money. And I have a general view about all utilities, that they should be held by the public, because in all circumstances, what happens is, we've seen it with the power grids, the transmission towers, the power stations are all transferred across into private hands, and then after a period of time, the charges start to ratchet up. There is one saviour here in that, and I've seen this in the gas industry, where they kept pumping up their prices, trying to milk the industry, and then what happened was, we've seen that the consumption of gas in Australia has dropped, because then people then moved away from that. And that's the risk that we see happening here. And for those sort of private private airports, of course, they're now looking to other sources of income that are not based around aviation. This is something that we've seen in other sectors, and it's something that we do have to stop. I would support in the next parliament, if I'm re-elected, I would support an inquiry into airports, because again, it's the way of bringing in information, bringing in perspective, and drawing attention to an issue that then becomes the start of a process for change. And it seems to me there's an obvious need for change back to the way we used to do things.
So, Senator, the Deputy Prime Minister in the last few weeks announced that he had rejected the 5-year master plan for Moorabbin Airport down in Victoria, and it was rejected on the basis that, for what I understand, that the master plan was prioritising non-aviation development at the site, and he's gone away, and with that rejection, the airport now has 180 days to resubmit a new 5-year master plan. Now, in and amongst all of that, I also understand that the airport, that there is potentially an investigation underway into some of the development that's happened at that airport. If in fact it's found that the airport management company and the leaseholder over the top of that public asset, and keeping in perspective that these large capital city privatised airports are owned by the Australian taxpayer, they're not owned by the private companies, so they remain an asset of everyday Australians. If in fact it's found that there are developments that have been undertaken without the consent of the minister, and that they were done in a manner in which it was potentially or allegedly done to outsmart the processes, would you believe it's a reasonable call for the head leases of these airports to be struck, so that a new leasing arrangement can be put in place that reprioritises the interests of aviation ahead of non-aviation?
Oh, look, I'll go back to someone who's much wiser than me, a gentleman named Lord Denning, who once said that no contract, no advantage can ever be obtained by way of fraud. If the fraud is proven, then the situation must be restored back to what it was prior to the event. Now, that's not to suggest a fraud has taken place, but the principle where someone does something for benefit, i.e. for a profit, that is outside of what is permissible in law, then that has to be undone. You have to remedy that situation. So I would give full support to that occurring in circumstances where it is properly shown that people acted beyond their remit. That's an approach that would have my absolute support.
Okay, well, it's certainly not an issue that you and I can solve today. I wish someone would hand me the keys to government so I could go and solve it for everybody. But certainly we're going to continue our advocacy behind the scenes. And I guess, Rex,
I think you have to compromise on it, Ben. What you got to say is, just let me be minister for 3 months. That's all I need.
Well, I said the same thing to Senator McDonald, and that we obviously, as an association and as an advocate, we all watch on with sincere interest at the Senate inquiries. And it certainly has crossed my mind many times that I would very much love the opportunity to sit on the same side of the desk as yourself and be there to ask the questions, because they are complex issues and you do need a thorough understanding of the total picture. And I guess one of those examples, Senator, would be the debate around self-certification medicals for Part 61 RPL and PPL holders. So that is recreational and private pilots under the CASA regulatory system have been discriminated for many, many years now by this regulator and have been refused access to a medical standard that the United States and the United Kingdom rolled out 5 years ago. And even in the last Senate estimates, which I understand you were trying to get to, and I think there was a delay in flights and whatnot, but that last Senate estimate, Senator McDonald pressed CASA on this issue and said, what's going on? And I believe a representative of CASA gave a very eloquent, but maybe a set of answers that were challenged a little bit for fact, that CASA was simply trying to do, their best job, and that they were, they'd really improve the system. Well, it's a bunch of bunkum. CASA refused to adopt the same standards as the United States, and they refused to adopt the same standards as the United Kingdom back in 2017. And they have continued this farce, and I've called it the big lie, and it is a big lie. They've just continued discriminating pilots, whilst at the same time, they've allowed pilots within the recreational system to use this very standard. And what appears lost on the government at times is CASA is responsible for the safety of the aviation system. And by virtue of CASA approving the Recreational Aviation Australia to use that standard, they've declared it safe. And so if it is safe, they should be rolling it out for all pilots. They shouldn't be simply saying, listen, if you go to our friends over at the RAOs and you pay them a fee, you go to a private company and you pay them money, we'll let you use a standard that we're denying Australian citizens who, through their taxes, pay for us as a regulator. And I think that is a huge affront to the Australian people. I think it's a very misleading position for CASA to have taken with the Australian Commonwealth. And I sit there on the other side of the television screen watching estimates going, how can they lie on this issue and get away with it time and time again? So I feel that frustration, Senator.
Yeah, look, and you're absolutely right. I come to the Senate as a former submariner, and I do very well in defence. The fact that I've got a pilot's licence helps me when I'm advocating or when I'm asking questions in relation to CASA. But you've got to remember, always on the Senate side of the table, we have generalists who often are well briefed, that are asking questions of people who are just live and breathe that domain. So there is, in fact, an imbalance in terms of knowledge. And what I can say there, and I know that AOPA has been very, very good in this space, is making sure the senators are well briefed. And if we give away a few secrets as to what happens to all of your members that are listening, you'll often see Senator McDonald or myself looking down to our phone, looking at a text that's coming from, and I won't say where it comes from, but saying you need to ask this question now because they've misled you. And we do get real-time help in relation to the sorts of responses that we get. But it is only because of organisations like yours, Ben, that do put together briefings for us on a whole range of issues that allow us to even, sort of start down that particular track. Look, I might just say to you, it wasn't a delayed flight. It was actually that the committee was racing through very, very quickly that I didn't end up landing in Canberra in time. So CASA was supposed to be on at, I think, 1900. And they were actually ended up being on at 1500. And one of the things I wanted to explore with them, I wanted to get them to put on evidence, was the fact that the Parliament changed the rules to say that it's not just about safety. We've got to grow our industry. And we did that. The Act was amended. And I wanted CASA to walk through everything they had done since that legislation had passed to make things easy, because I'm sure they would have come up with a list which then would have informed us we would have taken that back to your community to be able to rebut at the next estimates. So it's a bit of a shame that I missed out on that, but hopefully I'll get re-elected and I'll be there next time around trying to find these things out. But particularly in relation to the RAOs matter that you've raised, the medical certificates, that is something that needs to be sorted out. And I just can't believe why these things are so difficult.
It's actually not, Senator. They're playing a game. They think they're getting away with it. They're not. I think there was a quite a well-known industry participant who actually publicly put CASA on notice quite a few years ago and said, you can continue to play this game, but eventually you'll be dragged kicking and screaming to the finish line where you'll have to deliver what you simply should have delivered in 2017. But you refuse to do. So look, we could talk for hours on this. I'm often called the talking submarine, Senator. They say I could talk underwater for extended periods of time, and I would love to have you publicly here and just to talk through so many issues. But I know you're short on time, which just brings us to our closing section here, which is you've mentioned that you need to get re-elected. And we certainly hope you do get re-elected. You have earned legendary status within the aviation industry for the work that you do. And we as an aviation community genuinely appreciate and we value the senators and MPs that are part of this aviation caucus, this effort to try and return some sensibility to the industry and opportunity. And that's what all of this has been about. And I've been accused over the years of all kinds of nonsense in relation to pushing the agendas that we do. But here's the facts. Everything that we're seeking as an aviation industry is about positioning aviation for the next 10 and 20 years of growth. We want to be a responsive, sustainable and profitable industry that delivers safety. Nobody wants anything less. And I think it can be achieved through the great work of yourself and our other senators. You are all our voice inside of the parliament. You are our elected officials there doing such a great job. And so we don't, we're supposed to be this apolitical organisation, which at times I find is a very difficult thing because we really need to be publicly supporting those that are genuinely supporting aviation. And so, AOPA very much supports you, Senator Rex Patrick, in the work that you've done and the work that we believe you have in front of us, in front of you and in front of us. And so if people want to get involved to help you with your re-election campaign, and I'm just going to bring your website up as we're talking. This is the website for Senator Rex Patrick, which is at www.rexpatrick.com.au. But maybe could you just talk us through the things that we can be doing as an aviation industry for you? Having done so much for us, what can we do for you, Senator, in this election campaign?
Well, look, there's a whole range of things that can happen. If you're a South Australian and you're happy to come out and help on polling day or pre-polling days, or to in any way engage with the election process, I would be grateful for your help. That's particularly for South Australians. If you're not from South Australia and you've seen some of the stuff that I do, talk to a few South Australian friends and just let them know who I am. Most people don't get involved in politics. Most people don't, never think about politics until they're 3 minutes into the line at a polling booth. So if you can sort of spread the word, particularly amongst any South Australian friends, that would be great. I'd be grateful for that. Of course, donating. I don't want large corporate donations, but even just small donations that can help me promote some of the stuff that I've done in the past. The other way you can help, and this I know that AOPA is arranging a function in which people can come along and listen to my next cunning plan that I've developed with AOPA to again put proper pressure on CASA to change the way in which they think, and I'm sure we'll come to that. But I do want to address one of the concerns that you raised, that you want to be apolitical. I think it's fair to say that irrespective of what party a senator comes from, I'm an independent. We know Susan McDonald is a national. We've seen people like Glenn Stirl, who's from the Labor Party. I think the position that AOPA has taken is that any political person who is supportive of the general aviation industry, you support back. So I don't see this as a partisan manner per se. I think you rightly pick out people who you think are champions for your cause, people that relate to you, and you then offer them your support. There is no issue associated with this in terms of partisanship. I just want to reassure your members of that.
It's not an issue, Rex. We Senator, we thoroughly appreciate everything that you've done, and you have earned your place within the Senate for representing South Australia. And I couldn't speak highly enough of the work that you do. You've always been so willing to listen to the concerns of the industry and to give it a fair opportunity and a hearing. That's all we can expect as an industry, and you've just done such a sterling effort in response to that. So we couldn't ask for a better representative in South Australia for aviation. You are a true great friend to our general aviation industry, and somebody, I'm scared to hear, somebody who definitely we hope would be re-elected. Now, that brings us to our last issue, and you've slightly alluded to it. I'm going to bring it up on screen. Actually, before I bring it on screen, let's just talk about what, I guess, the context of this. Obviously, AOPA, we've been learning on our journey and getting a little bit clever and a little bit smarter each time that we do these engagements. And one of the things that we do recognise is that the Senate have done a great job, excuse me, through the inquiry to produce some recommendations, and now we need to drive some of those recommendations. But more broadly, we also need to bring a greater focus on the structure and the management of CASA and how it can be changed and how we can actually take our aviation industry forward. And you have some pretty firm ideas as an experienced senator at the centre of many of these issues as to how that can be achieved. And so between us, we've come together to create an event which we're going to call the May Day event. It's going to be held on Sunday, the 1st of May, from the AOPA headquarters at Bankstown Airport. We have a very large hangar there, and we intend on equipping the hangar with chairs and tables and setting up the barbecues and inviting as many aviation representatives and participants from around the country to come in and to hear you give a presentation to the aviation industry, I guess, on not only some of your experience in the past, but the vision you have moving forward, and how we as an industry can come together to help facilitate and drive that. So maybe what I'll do, Senator, is I'll put the slide up, which just has the information, and you can talk at the same time. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see you as I bring the slide up, but you can at least talk us through what has brought you to that moment.
Yeah, look, I think I'd like to think that you and I talking together came up this idea of a May Day event. I prefer to call it a May Day event on the basis that I think industry is in a really, really difficult place. You heard me talking about that politics is about pressuring. It's about putting pressure to cause change for the betterment of any particular area in our society or any particular industry sector. I've got a really good idea as to something that I can do in the next Parliament that will might be seen by some as a sledgehammer cracking a nut, but I think we're at the point where a sledgehammer might actually be required, and I'd like to be able to announce what I'm going to do with the cooperation of AOPA in the next Parliament. I think people will get quite excited when they hear what we've schemed together, Ben, you and I, so and others. So we've engaged some people in industry, some South Australians, people like Dick Smith, and come up with a cunning plan which we'd like to reveal on the 1st of May.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to hosting the event. We'll be putting some information out via the website and also via our direct email and our social media today, announcing the date of the event, the venue of the event, and an open invitation to the entire aviation industry. And Senator, I hope that we get so many people to this event, because this is definitely worthwhile. People traveling, if you can't bring your light aircraft, we understand that. Book yourself an airline ticket, get yourself to Sydney and come to Bankstown for the 1st of May. It's going to be a Sunday. We're going to hold this as a lunchtime event at the hangar facilities. As I said, tables and chairs will all be set up. We'll have the barbecues running. This is, I guess, the best possible way that we can engage at the grassroots. There'll be plenty of media there at the event covering what's going on. And I know for certain, and I don't want to give anything away, but I know for certain that the presentation and the concept that you'll be putting on the table is one that the entire aviation industry will want to get behind and will want to see driven. So, Senator, it has been our absolute pleasure to be able to interview you for the first time, and I hope that what we've done here becomes a regular occurrence. We would love the opportunity to sit with you more often and just casually talk through your reflections and your thoughts on many of the issues. And I hope that what the aviation industry sees from this process as well is that we should be proud to stand up for the issues that matter for our industry, and we should not be fearful of being heard and being seen on these topics. And the more we come forward, the more public our conversations are, the more awareness we build around these issues, and the more connections we build with our senators and MPs within Parliament. This can only be a great thing for the aviation industry. And if it results in applying enough pressure and change towards a positive direction, who knows? We may also look to a future in the near term of seeing a CASA shaped and structured more appropriately in order to take a modern aviation industry forward for the next 20 years.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving the opportunity to have a chat to your members. You guys are doing a great job, and I look forward to seeing everyone on the 1st of May.
Thank you very much, Rex. Well, there you go, guys. Senator Rex Patrick out of South Australia. What a fantastic champion for general aviation that he is on a multitude of issues. And I know that I've received a phenomenal amount of correspondence over the 6 years that I've been involved with AOPA from members who've had direct interactions with him, and from those that support the work that he does in the Australian Parliament, and specifically the enormous body of work that he's worked on through the Senate RRAT. So we really do appreciate that opportunity to meet with him. Now, as we've just discussed, there is going to be an opportunity for the aviation industry to come together and to take part in the May Day event. I'm just going to bring this back up on screen so everyone can see. May Day event for the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, with a special media event that is being brought to us through Rex Patrick, South Australian Senator. It's going to be held on Sunday, the 1st of May, from our headquarters facilities at Bankstown Airport. We'll be publishing details of the location and the invitation, excuse me, via our Facebook page, our website, and other social media channels. And we certainly hope to see as many of you right across the aviation industry take part. There's going to be some fantastic media representation on the day. All of this is to hear a very special presentation from Senator Rex Patrick about what he plans to do in the next term if he's successfully re-elected. And we believe that the information that he'll be sharing is pretty exciting. So a huge invitation to everybody right across the aviation industry to come and take part. Now, it would be remiss of me if I didn't do this. I do it at the end of every video. If you like what the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia is up to, we certainly do, because we do it all for you. We're out there fighting every day of the week for aircraft owners, for pilots, for aviation businesses, aircraft charter companies, flying schools, maintenance companies. You're all included in this. If you like having a representative speak up and speak strongly on the issues that matter to our industry, we certainly hope that you will join the association. Jump online to www.aopa.com.au/membership. It's just $159 to help support, put the fuel in the tanks, and allow us to get to our target. And after all, the mission is you. So thank you, everybody, for watching this latest install of our AOPA Live. We're hoping that we might be joined very soon by our Deputy Prime Minister for a sit-down and conversation. We're hoping that will take place in the next week sometime. We'll keep pressuring to make sure that gets done. And we'll also be reaching out to other senators from the other major parties and some of the other independents to come and have a conversation with us as well. After all, we're interested in building a really strong caucus, a strong network of those out there that would like to seek to support aviation and help take us forward. Until next time, Ben Morgan from AOPA.